And we're going to jump into our next panel. So the Lahaina community has faced unparalleled challenges since the fires first took place a little over a year ago. However, where water once flowed freely through wetlands and stream systems, the restoration of these water resources offers a path towards both cultural renewal and fire resilience. The path forward should place returning water to the land at the forefront, recognizing that restored streams and wetlands are key to preventing future disasters, not just in Lāhaina, but really throughout Hawaii. Today, we're joined by three distinguished experts who bring unique perspectives on community leadership, water rights, environmental law, and fire ecology. Together, they will explore how ancestral knowledge of water stewardship, combined with legal frameworks and contemporary scientific approaches, can guide us in restoring stream flows, reviving watershed health, and creating more fire-resilient landscapes across our islands. I'm going to read the bios of each of the panelists, and then we can welcome them and they can join me. So please join me in welcoming Kekai Keahi. Kekai is a Maui Komohana community leader and Kia'i, a ninth-generation Lahaina resident. Kekai is an educator and thought leader, advocating for Maui Komohana and its wai since before that was a thing of panels and infamous Instagram videos. In the wake of the wildfires that ravaged Maui, he is who the community looks to for guidance on water and really any issue concerning Lahaina, Maui, Komohana, or Maui Nui. Professor Kapua Sproat, I mentioned Kapua ala smells like justice. So if you know the fragrance of that flower, it's very familiar. Kapua is a professor of law at the University of Hawaii, William S. Richardson School of Law. She's our director of Kahuli'au Center for Excellence in Native Hawaiian Law, which is an academic center that promotes education, scholarship, community outreach, and collaboration on issues of law, culture, and justice for Native Hawaiians and other Pacific and Indigenous peoples. She's also a co-director of the Native Hawaiian Rights Clinic, and she teaches incredible courses in Native Hawaiian and environmental law and legal writing. You know, really for years now, Kapua's clinic has provided direct legal services to communities across Hawaii, a lot of times on issues of wai, and so mahalo Kapua for joining us. And Dr. Clay Trauernicht, pretty good? Oh, I feel so bad, but people mispronounce Kamana Mai Kalani all the time, so excuse me, Clay. Clay grew up on Long Island, New York, and came to Hawaii in 1999 as a wildlife project intern. He soon turned to plant science, pursuing graduate degrees at the University of Hawaii and the University of Tasmania, which led to work with community-based land care programs in many parts of the world. He's been an extension faculty at UH Manoa in the Natural Resource and Environmental Management Department since 2013, working on wildfire and ecosystems restoration to support local communities, watershed programs, and landowners across Hawaii and Micronesia. Please join me in welcoming our panelists. In conversation in passing, Kekai was telling me, if I was listening to that panel, if they wasn't from Ha'ena, I would think they was from Lahaina. The struggles and issues are so similar. And, you know, this might not be an easy conversation for many of us. I want to recognize that, the loss and challenges in the Lahaina community. We're trying to bridge this conversation not for comparison and contrast, but so we can get to a better state for all of our islands and try to learn together. And so I just want to open with that. You know, maybe, if you don't mind, so I was a State Water Resource Management Commissioner for 8 years, and I first seen Kekai out front organizing for his community on stream restoration efforts. Before the Lahaina fires, I heard from them the potential hazards around fire and not, you know, the issues of not restoring streams. I was so inspired by their community. It was some of the first hearings we had, Makolela, Hawaii. And yeah, that's just, you guys made my time on the commission worthwhile. And so I want to just maybe, if we can start perhaps by framing, Kekai, the historical and cultural context around Lāhaina, what Lāhaina was in the past. And
well, in a nutshell, Lāhaina was the capital of the kingdom at the time. Prior to that, it is, I mean, people like to call Lāhaina the Venice of the Pacific. I like to change that train of thought. I like to say Italy was the Lāhaina of Europe.
Woo, there we go.
But I mean, like getting out of that consciousness and changing it to a different place. But yeah, I remember my grandmother telling me stories when she first came to Lāhaina. She born in Pololu Valley, moved to Lanai, met my grandfather, came to Lāhaina. And she would say how it rained every day when she was young. And as soon as she got off the boat at Mala, they went up into Kanaha and Kahoma Valley where we had taro patches and stuff. And she remembered fruit trees everywhere. And she was young. And so as I was walking up the valley with my grandfather, she had her dress and she was picking every fruit she could find, like it was candy. And my grandfather was laughing because he's like, hey, Lolo, we're going to walk back down the hill. You can pick them up later. But she, you know, she noticed the bountifulness of the area. And in fact, where my family from is down by the ocean, we still have our house on the beach. It's called Mala. And that was the area where the chief's garden was. That was his plantation. And so every valley, we look at the west side of Maui from Ukumehame all the way to Honoko'au, probably like almost 40 miles long. It's made up of two mokus, Anapali and Lāhaina. Every single valley had taro patches. The biggest valley on the west side, which is the longest valley in Hawaii, is Honoko'au, 11 miles long. They had 4,700 taro patches in the one valley alone. So the ability for this area to produce food was great. We also know Lāhaina as Kamalu Ulu Olele. And it refers to the ulu groves that was found in Lāhaina. You would hear of Kona having this ulu belt along the mountainside that would stretch maybe 100 miles long, a mile wide, and how it would pull the moisture from the air and drip it down to the ground, and they would farm on it. We had the same thing in Lāhaina. That was all cut down. The sugarcane plantations pushed the cane up against the ulu trees, and they burnt the whole place down. So that was the beginning. But the food production was great. The way in which we manage our environment, ecosystem, and fisheries and food production was interesting, because yet in my grandfather's time, they still were practicing this what we call a rotating type sanctuary for fishing, to where if you notice this area is stressed in fish and it's kind of population going down, they close them, but it's not indefinite. It should always be a resource you can go back to. So they'll close certain places and they'll only fish these other places. And after maybe 6 months, because if you give life one chance, you'll be astounded how fast nature replaces itself. After 6 months, maybe a year at the most, they reopen and they maybe shut different other areas. So that type of management in Lāhaina was what they would do. And that would keep our fish productions plentiful. And this is something we're working with the state to try and say, hey, let's look at this and see, instead of close like Honolulu Bay, they close the bay down and they say, okay, fish from this area are going to repopulate and then travel outside of that bay. But guess what? They stay there. They don't migrate out. So you know, it's the same guys that came up with the rule. They said, you know, you only can pick up 1 pound of ogo, but you can pick up as much as you like manawea. They don't know that's the same limo. So that's the stuff that, you know, Lāhaina was about. This is how we maintain ourselves and our environment and keep ourselves going for all this time.
We're going to remember that. Venice is the Lāhaina of Europe, right? That's what I heard. Okay, so that's beautiful.
Can I add one thing, Kamana, really quick? Kekai's talked about the bountiful food systems and, you know, the lo'i and how that really fed the nearshore marine resources. And I just wanted to mention the local i'a and the local i'a kalo as well, because that's something that Lāhaina was so famous for. And for those who are not kupa of that place, or maybe who've only visited recently, you wouldn't know when you go to Lāhaina, even before the fire, because you don't see the same kind of bounty in the fish ponds. And I'm not talking about fish ponds like fish pond, like one koi pond. I mean like 10, 14, 17 acres and whole networks across of Lāhaina that was enabled by this kamalu'ulu olele, and that helped to really co-manage the ground and surface water resources together. And so I just wanted to add that additional thing, because for those of us who've only been to Lāhaina recently, it's a very different place.
Yeah, you know, sorry, perfectly reminded me. But a lot of our fish ponds, if you look in Lāhaina, wasn't those fish ponds you'd see like on Molokai ways outside on the reef? It was all inland. And so it was fed by vast amounts of fresh water that would maintain these inland ponds, like Moku'ula, Alamihi, big fish ponds.
And just one more thing really quick. It's amazing how this network of the local i'a really brought together the streams. So they were fed both by streams as well as from groundwater resources welling up, not in the nearshore marine area, so not offshore, but actually all these huge inland ponds. And that was, and so much so that there are stories of how the ali'i, when they came back to Moku'ula, could actually bring their canoes and sail them all the way in. So tremendous resources of Vai and Vai.
And I think most of our audience understands, you know, the reason why Lāhaina looks the way it does today, but maybe just from a historical ecosystems context, what changed that landscape? Kekai, you talked about plantations burning down the ulu, and just.
So about 100 plus years ago is when we start sugarcane starting to make its debut. And to feed sugar, you need water. So on the west side, I think we have 25 rivers. And there was a fishing and grabbing every single stream that they could find that was perennial and divert this water into the uplands and the lower lands where it was more barren to grow their crops. But in the meantime, what was happening was a lot of the people who lived in the valleys who depend on this water for their tar patches, like Honokohau, disappeared. 11 miles of tar patches vanished, gone, along with a lot of different outer valleys. And then when they started monocropping, taking down everything that was in the way just for sugar. Sugar is not food, you know, I guess you guys understand. It's not really food. It's flavoring, but it's not really food. And so it's that bulldozing of these lands, the taking of these waters that started I always say, the fire never stopped August 8th. The fire started 100 years ago when they started this production. Throughout the years, as we was going through the process of reinstating our stream flows, getting our designations for our water protections for our groundwater, we learned a lot of data that was coming through with the people who was doing the studies, and we was finding out that every stream, every foot of river, Honokohau was 11 miles long. I could do the math, 5,000 something each mile. Every foot of river, you pulling back almost 1,000 gallons or maybe a little bit less of water back into the ground that goes into the aquifer that we pump out to drink. Now you take away that source of water that's in that stream. Some does go back into the ground when you say water in your crops, but a lot is lost through evaporation. So that I know I went into Halava, I believe, way back, and they said it takes 30 years from the water the rain to hit the ground, go underground and get into the aquifer so they can pump it out. It takes 30 years. Our mountains is 6,000 feet high, a lot higher than Halava. So I can pretty much say it takes double that time for our water to get down into the aquifers. And so these streams are the superchargers of our aquifers that make water available for us when we want to pull water out of the ground. And we lost that. So after 100 years, we're starting to see the effects of what plantation life did.
And so you can just imagine that change of, Malu'ulu'olele, this vast landscape, collecting wai, redistributing wai between Mauka and Makai, farming fish and i'a. transferring over time through, plantation, agriculture, capitalism, diverting waters, monocropping, drying, contributing more and more to the drying. And I think we'll get to, we'll come back and forth on this, but I want to ask this question for Clay. So there was another wildfire, Makaweli, Kauai, Kaumakani side. Lots of fear, right? And we see there's some commonalities. In the drying areas that are super fire prone seem to be former plantation places that, have stolen water for 150 years. And I did say stolen. I'm not on the commission anymore, whatever. But it's tremendous fear, right? That's all around Hawaii and our communities. And this question is for Clay. So, Clay, recently, and you might have read these articles, recently the Hawaii Attorney General laid out, sort of 10 priorities to protect Hawaii from wildfires at the legislative hearing. None of these priorities mention restoring stream water. Given your background and extensive experience in this area, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, there's a phase 3 coming, so sort of we'll see what kind of recommendations they make. There's this one recommendation, so it's kind of buried in there, and I think there's some room for us to interpret it, but it's this idea of adhering to this cohesive strategy, and there's a lot of jargon wrapped up in those words, but what the cohesive strategy is essentially is a kind of a multi-agency attempt at the US national level to sort of say, what does it look like for us to be safe from wildfires? So in other words, like at the community level, landscape level, what do all of these things we have to pull together for our firefighters in particular? And one of those elements, and you mentioned it actually, is fire resilient landscape. So also pretty jargony, like what are we talking about? But what it looks like for each place is specific to like what people want to see done with that land. And I mean, you guys just, the past little opening, however long that was, that's a fire resilient landscape for Hawaii, right? Like, what does it mean when your communities are safe, when you have the resources that you need, right? And I think one way that I sort of try to frame this for people is like, fire is just a symptom. Like, if we were doing what we need to be doing, we were supporting communities in Lāhaina, in Hawai'i, like fires, we wouldn't worry about fire, I wouldn't have a job. I mean, that would be like the kind of ideal, right? So it's really the function of our inability and the lack of resources, the lack of investment in allowing these, well, if it's people, putting people back on the land, if it's a natural resource management kind of question, which also sounds super jargony and sort of abstract, but like, what does it take to care for lands? And that's what we saw in Lāhaina, is just this failure, right? And so that description of what happened with the plantations, I think it's really important. I was kind of glad that you guys all brought it up talking about Kauai too, like that historical piece. Like I studied biophysical stuff, but I'm like a very avid student of history. Like that, the violence of that change, it rippled through into the future, into our present, and that's what we saw, right? And I was like so desperate after these fires for people. I mean, you had all this stuff, oh, it's climate change, and you're like, no way, this was within our control. I mean, Kekai talks about it all the time, like they knew, right? We knew it was a problem. So what are those, back to the fire resilient landscapes, it looks like the vision that we've been talking about all morning, like the vision, particularly that Kanaka Maoli have, and what they had established is what we need to move forwards to the future, whichever way we're going. We're only going forward, Yeah, so.
With the best of the past.
Yeah.
So a lot in that report, Clay, seems to be more short-term, kind of consolidating of power and resource and efforts. But I think what you're saying is fire resilient landscapes take a longer-term commitment approach. I mean, I think that's some of my fear. Like, there's right now in places very close to me, people are like, cut down all the trees. Don't put trees next to buildings. We're super worried about fire, right? And grown trees don't usually burn. It's invasive dried grasses, right? So we actually want more forest, and So why are some of the short-term solutions the ones that are kind of offered, Clay, and not?
No, I think a lot of it comes from, again, sort of like continental U.S. frameworks and what we're thinking. So I'm getting really into the, like, literally the weeds, right? As far as, like, you know, it's grass is our issue here. Grasses, haole, right? So all these invasive plants. I mean, and even calling them invasive is problematic because if you're a rancher, you know, this is a resource. We could manage these lands pretty productively, you know, even with the grasses that are there, and well-maintained rangelands don't burn in the same way, and they, you know, if at all. And so again, I don't want to put words and say the grass is our enemy. Like that's really sort of short-sighted. But in the sense of how do we change that landscape? What could it look like? Again, you have the example of Kamalu'ulo'olele. Like that landscape was thriving. It was abundant tree cover, you know, so we have a thing to work with. We can shade out grasses, right? So definitely don't cut down your trees. That's something that's probably adapted from like pine forests, right? Whereas if you're in a house in the woods in Colorado or something, you've got pine trees growing all over your house, like I'd be worried. But fruit trees like that, yeah, our problem is grass. And so some of it's the translation or mistranslation for our context ecologically. A lot of it's, I think, just like fear, obviously, right? What we saw in Lāhaina. Like I could have never imagined. I was afraid to death of rain bombs. Like that's, you asked me a year and a half ago or whatever, that would be my biggest fear as far as public safety. And I sort of had, I don't want to say this, but like given up in a sense that like the impacts we saw from fires were all Malka, right? So we're like mourning the loss of native forests and species. I mean, that fire in 2022, right? That the year before, 4,000 acres burned and all went Malka above Lāhaina, right? So in that same footprint, same place, back to what did we know and what did we not know, but what that didn't make anybody act, and I'd seen it over and over and over again. So all that to say, yeah, how do we make a change?
2018, we saw the same fire that took out a dozen or so homes. Same fire. Just that this time was supercharged by the winds that we had coming down. So we all knew, and you know, this is, even prior to 2018, we've been screaming out loud about the possibilities of this happening. And the county really never take us serious. Yeah? And now, you know, it's this I told you so moment. Yes. But it's too late already.
Yeah, eight large fires before 2023 in that same space, like in that same zone. So, you know, it's like what's that movie where the asteroid's coming, right? And we don't do anything. So, yeah.
So to be really clear then, because I'm not a scientist, but if we're moving away from the jargon, then a Lāhaina is what fire resiliency looks like.
100%.
Hawaii, right? And that how we got to Lāhaina is a deliberate attempt, but over a century of plantation water mismanagement. So the removal of native systems, of native knowledge, of native resources, and the replacement with invasive grasses, and I think systems that then led us to where we are now.
I think the replacement with grasses would be giving the plantation some credit.
Yeah.
They left that place dirt.
Yeah, it was nothing.
They never try and replant. Once they shut down, they left dirt, they left their pesticides, they left their junks, everything.
Yeah.
Kapua, you know, in the weeks and months kind of following the fires, Lāhaina folks and the broader Hawaii community, I mean, we were shocked at kind of how quickly, in the wake of all this profound loss and grief, developers kind of swooped in to lay claims to Lāhaina lands and waters. You published an article with Naomi Klein called, you call this plantation disaster capitalism, which opened a lot of people's eyes. Can you just sort of expand and explain on what that means?
Sure. I mean, Naomi Klein is you know, the queen of, and I don't know, she might not appreciate this, but she's the queen of disaster capitalism. And she really popularized this notion that in these times of extreme collective trauma, you have folks, often capitalists, who swoop in and take advantage of these moments of trauma and collective grief for their personal financial gain. And often in ways that would not be able to be realized if it were not for that horrific event. So in the wake of the tsunamis in Thailand and Sri Lanka, where you had subsistence fishers and farmers who were in evacuation camps and whose land was seized. In Puerto Rico, with the privatization of the electricity grid, right? We see these examples over and over and over again. And unfortunately, here in Hawaii, we have our own unique and insidious form with plantation disaster capitalism. And in the wake of the fire that ravaged Lāhaina, we saw within moments folks swooping in to buy land, and we saw in particular what became the biggest water grab in Hawaii's recent history, where we had folks like Kekai who had been working for generations, really, to more proactively manage their streams and water resources. The Water Commission and Aaron Strauch in particular had been doing studies all across Maui Komohana since 2016. There was a series where they enacted stream flow standards in order to try to protect these areas. And when that wasn't enough, then it had to be designated. But this system of proactive water management was put into place. And within a handful of days after the fires, the governor took this opportunity to use an emergency proclamation to do away with all of these protective standards for the streams and that the communities had really worked so hard for. And so we saw, and it was really, and we call it plantation disaster capitalism because it was a purposeful partnering of large landed former plantation interests across Maui Komohana and the government, to be frank. And what they were only able to accomplish this water grab as a result of the Lāhaina fires because they used the emergency proclamation. And I just want to be super clear too that this is not something that is pau. We're seeing repercussions of this into the present with the Lo'ea seat on the Water Commission, where this governor and this head of the Department of Land and Natural Resources continues with this power grab that doesn't respect the law, the people of the community, and provides, unfortunately, a really stark contrast to what we heard with the first panel, right? Where we had community-based leadership, community-centered decision-making, bottom-up decision-making. Here we see something totally different that I think is going to be to the detriment of the resources and the communities in Maui Komohana.
It was such a, like you said, such a radical shift and power grab and so unexpected. You know, my time on the Water Commission, we didn't do everything right, and you know, I had to learn my way and stuff, but at least we set a whole bunch of in-stream flow standards that hadn't been set before. I think we kind of messed up Red Hill. We couldn't get the Navy held accountable. I asked the Navy questions. They just lied to my face, and the huge leak ended up happening in 2021. But when the fires happened, you know, I was still, my Uncle Keola texted me. He said, evacuating. And I didn't even know the fires had started. So that's like how it all went down. And if you weren't there and you're just worrying about your family, like I was, you know, this is my tutu's house. This is our family's generations. And then I'm on the plane and I see the Civil Beat article about Kaleo. And I'm going, wait, no, this isn't even, there's no way that the water in the reservoir could have been used to fight the fire. It's BS. So I kind of laughed. I thought, like, what is this weird spin, you know? And then it went crazy, right? And then I saw, like Kapua said, like, all of a sudden it was like, oh, the people that were restoring streams and farming taro somehow were indicted in this fire. And it's a radical, I'd never seen that kind of galvanizing over something so untruthful before in Hawaii. I'll be straight up honest. I'm surprised by the power structure that they're able to do that to us, where we had to get at the Capitol and stand up and say the truth. But, you know, Kekai, you guys was on the ground and experiencing that. Like, how was that for?
You know, I believe we were the first to have the entire district designated as a groundwater management area and get all of our streams back as a district. And that was over 20 years of nonstop work. The thing different, what we did was we brought our kids and our young into them, so it wasn't just us. And so in Lāhaina, when you see movements, you see a movement that go from top to bottom, old and young, and well-educated, well-spoken, the ability to communicate is just beyond what people are ready for. So when government does come to town, they get put into place. But all that work that we did with a snap of his finger was erased, and we was afraid. And then we got mad, and then we organized. And then we showed up in Honolulu with the help of Kapua and a lot of the people that brought us to the, what was that place called? Yeah, over there. And so us guys thinking, because when we back Maui, I told Don Chang, I said, when you come, you better get on big room, because we're going to have 300-400 people there. So when we got to Oahu, I was thinking, okay, we're going to have a big room, and you get in there, you can hold like probably 20 people. And we get everybody sitting outside, and we went through, 8 hours of testimony over Kaleo, over the removal of the water code, and I'm going to put it out there. West Maui Land Company, Peter Martin and Glenn Tremble is the guys that wrote the letter to Don Chang, CCing the governor, saying that they need the water. And these guys is all developers. And the governor took that and ran with that, and that was a national news, international news. So what we did is we called a press release down at Waikuli Park, right below Hawaiian Homes, called the governor on his bullshit. That night, we got a call from the governor saying, meet me at the Kaumanu Shopping Center, we're going to have a meeting. He was pissed. So we have the meeting, our mayor, head down, no say one word the whole time. I thought he was going to represent us. So we went to battle with the governor. And one of the things, I guess he never liked how we was coming at this, but we never liked how he came at him too. I said, everything that you put out there for the world to see was a lie. And now our job was, how do we pull back a lie that comes from one head official when we just community members? But guess what? When we was down in Waikuli Park, we had Japan, Australia, China, Korea. We had people from England. I said, come in on a plane one time, and this lady from England said, I saw you on the news. So our word went around. We regained control of the narrative, and we put the truth out there. We made the governor look like an ass. His wife was in a meeting, I don't know why, but she was mad. You know, if you guys get an issue, then you should come to him and talk to him. They said, well, before he put out stupid stuff like that, he should come talk to us. So the relationship with the governor has stayed the same to this very day. He's been coming to Lāhaina. He said he came to Lāhaina over 25 times. Not once yet did he meet with our community. He met with all the business people, the resort people. In fact, only maybe 2 months or so after the fire, we opened the resorts. Well, everybody's still homeless, trying to find a place for live. People staying in hotels, trying to get removed for tourism. Then we realized, well, we knew already, but that was the evidence for sure that what we knew was the truth, that we really no matter in the scheme of things when it comes to this economic engine that we get in West Maui, then he awakened a sleeping giant. We had one eye open already, now 2 eyes open. And then we started mobilizing, we started moving with the help of Kapua and everybody around the state, not just Lāhaina. It's not just one Lāhaina thing, but it's going to affect everybody statewide. If we lose control of these waters in West Maui, be ready, your place next. Because the guys who trying to forget them is the developers, and it's the government that's trying to help them, guys. We thought the government was supposed to protect the public. It's not really that way. The public protect the public. And the hard thing is to motivate people. So that we just heard the panel before, when you get on crisis, people motivate, and they mobilize, and they move. The thing is, we was already moving before the fire in Lāhaina. So when the fire came, we wasn't not ready. It was easy for some, 300-400 people. We was already been doing that for years already. And I remember telling Don Cheng, be ready. Be ready when you come to Lāhaina. You're not going to hear guys just yapping and talking nonsense. You're going to see our kids from the elementary level to high school and everything in between and above that communicate in a way that's going to put you to shame. If you guys get the chance to go check out these videos, check them out. I was one of the first to testify at the Kalani Moku building, and I went to the back of the room, kicked my leg up, and I watched this masterpiece happen in front of me and unfold. It was beautiful. And you know, on Maui, I saw him draw some. I saw Neil draw some tears at the beauty of our kids, and what he said and resonate with me. He said, how far as a people did we came from when he was young to what we see now with the way we can communicate and how powerful we are now. And I remember that. And so I put all of my effort into our young that's coming up, because they're going to take our place. But the bad part about that is we don't give them, well, we give them one goal and something they have to aim for, they're going to be more precious and more beautiful, but we actually give them the burden of having to carry. So they got to be strong. And it so happened for us Hawaiians, because of the way we grew up and the stuff that we had to experience, our shoulders and our legs was made strong for this. When that fire came, there had plenty of people would get together, mobilize, and in the community to bring food and water and stuff like that. But if you look at the forefront, really, the Hawaiians didn't even hesitate. They knew exactly what to do. And like I said, it was a lot of people that came together. But at the forefront of all of these different hubs, you saw Hawaiians there for help everybody.
And that's why, to me, it was such a shame that in the wake of this, what really should be celebrated as a community resilient effort, that the governor then turned and blamed Hawaiians for what happened. That he said in his press conference right after that, if we're really being honest here, we need to look at, who's using the water and who's not willing to share the water. And I want to be super clear that there was never any issue with the kupa of Maui Komohana not being willing to share. But that was a narrative that was created and that was deployed by West Maui Land with the support of the governor in order to do away with the water code and the protection of the resources there. And it was so hurt, and he didn't just say Native Hawaiians, he said kalo farmers in particular. So and I see that also as a fundamental difference between what happened in Maui Komohana and what happened in Halale'a, where I'm from, and where I also got to help with the recovery effort. But to see the difference in the way that leadership, where in Halale'a people were looking to traditional knowledge, to biocultural resources as solutions, in Lāhaina, the governor pegged us, Native Hawaiians, as the problem. And that was the problem.
And I'd just like to add real quick, just so it's very, very clear, is that the use of water, or the availability of water, was not an issue during this fire. All of the fires that happen, the burden goes 100% on the firefighters, right? This is it's all on their shoulders because of so much, what we're not doing prior. So anything that would have been in place that would have prevented something like that would have had to been, again, land care that would have been in place for months, if not years, right? And so they're making this claim based on water in the reservoirs. The only way you can use water in reservoirs is through helicopter operations during a fire. Once that fire hit regardless of the winds, right? So the wind speed made that not even an option. You can't use helicopters during conditions like that. But then once that fire goes from, a wildfire, like a brush fire, into an urban setting, there's really no putting it out. At that point, it's emergency, it's evacuation, right? And so the idea of sort of using the crisis, I guess, as an excuse for these things, it really erases all of the things that, coming from fire science, you identify as best practices. The best practices are all the things we do way beforehand, which speaks to the work that it takes actually to do those things, is what these guys have been working on for decades, right? And more than a century, obviously, honestly. So just so that's clear, this whole thing was not really hinging on water availability. It's not the problem at stake here.
I think it all started from when the fire department, as they was fighting the fires, started losing pressure in their lines. And so the narrative put out there is they ran out of water and they never have these reservoirs to tap into to put out these fires. It kind of started like that, but they never look at, we was talking to a lot of my firefighter friends, if it wasn't the electricity that was running the pumps, it was the homes that is tied into the same system as the fire hydrants we discovered on Flaw. The water for the fire hydrants and the homes were tied into the same system. All the homes was burning. What's happening to those pipes? They're melting and letting water go. 3,000 homes. Of course you're going to lose pressure in the lines. But they still, in the West Maui Land, never pay attention to that part, but they ran out of water because of the kalo farmers, fed that to the governor took it and ran with it and went international with it. So that's the dynamics that's going on that we say dealing with. Well, we still trying to find out if my cousin is dead or if my friend is dead. We still don't know. People not even really ID their families yet. And this is how they play the game. It would be kind of lame of me if, say, your wife died and I come to you, hey, I like buy your land. Right after she died, you no more use from her, I buy it from you. That's what he did. That's what they was doing. That's what they did to us.
And really, in the wake of the fires, so the fire was on August 8th, the governor suspended the water code within a matter of days, did away with the stream flow standards, which meant then, just to be super real about it, that the water came out of the streams, which would have been building resiliency, because in many of the areas in Maui Komahana, like Kaua'ula Valley, for example, people don't have the water hydrants or county systems that you have in developed communities like Launiupoko and other areas. So people literally would be scooping water from the away or from the stream with buckets in order to fight the fires. So in this situation, it was just, it was completely untenable. And
A lot of the water systems, right? 77%, I believe, of the water is controlled by private purveyors in West Maui. Only 23% is controlled by the county government. Okay, all of those private systems, none of them tie into the county system, so that when we fall short of water, we can grab water from them. So that's another flaw too. That's a second flaw. Well, third flaw. One is we cannot tie into them. 3 is that they control the vast majority of water on the west side. And that shouldn't be. Water is public. So we got to find a way to pull that back into public holding so that we're not falling into the same type of situation. I think Maui County is 80% controlled by private purveyors, water. 80%. Well, I think Oahu is kind of like the reverse of that, where the majority of the water is controlled through public. So you can see the dynamic there. Well, when they control this water, what they can do with this water in terms of development. Right now we're pushing hard. So in Launiupoko, where this developer developed, one of the county rules was if you so many feet away from the road, you either got to bring a fire hydrant into your property, because there's big properties over there, or have a swimming pool so that you can use to put out the fire. What do you think these rich guys are going to opt for? Swimming pools. In a place that's already about 90% of the sustainability of our water resource. We had 90%. We cannot afford swimming pools in the West Maui. In fact, that's something that we should be pushing through a county, that West Side cannot have pools anymore. Not because of any other reason other than we don't want enough water. So when they're grumbling about no more water, what the fire will do is when the house is burned down, you realize how much swimming pools had outside there. How many swimming pools? It's like, man, we cannot afford this. It's a luxury we cannot afford.
so in the wake of the fire, when people really should have been focusing on their ohana and the recovery efforts and taking care of themselves and each other, they were flying to Oahu for the September Water Commission meeting that Kekai mentioned earlier, or dealing with the same issues in October when the Water Commission of the same year when the Water Commission went to Maui, and then since then at the legislature. And so it's been a continual effort 1 year on, right, when people are worried about many other things happening around the world. Lāhaina is still struggling with rebuilding and struggling with these issues, and the water use permitting is just beginning. So this is going to be an ongoing issue for a long time, unfortunately.
Is it a good time to talk about that lower seat? No?
Can.
Well, Neo seat, Neo power, so we need a replacement. And we got 3 really good people that we would be fine with any one of them. The governor never really cared for that. So they got one 4th person, which was from Lāhaina, thinking that Lāhaina people going to support. But this guy fought us every step of the way when it came to the interim in-stream flow standards and the designation. And yet he was going to represent the whole state of Hawaii on that cultural seat to protect the rights of Hawaiians. We came out, we smashed the guy. He stepped down or he removed? He stepped down. Restarted the process, They restarted the nominating process, and who did they get to? The governor get to get the nominees. The same guy that was told, we don't like him a part. We don't like him a part of it. He was the guy that picked the new nominees, and so one of his picks again was a guy from Lāhaina that was in bed with the person that sent the letter to the governor about the whole fire thing. And the governor had him, well, in fact, he's sitting as an interim position on the commission right now. Dangerous. And that's the guy that's supposed to represent us culturally, to make sure that our rights is taken care of, and the governor get him at the top. And the people that the rest of the state looking at, that three, that feel that is best for the position, swept away. I don't know if you guys voted for the guy, but I think you guys shouldn't vote for the guy the next time, bro.
So just to provide a little bit of context on what Kekai is referring to as a lo'ea seat. So the Water Commission that Kamana sat on for many years, that Neil Hannes also sat on, and what we're referring to is this lo'ea seat was, so 1978, there was a constitutional convention that determined that water is a public trust, belongs to all of us here, so not anyone's private property, despite what's happening in Maui Komohana now, but actually supposed to be managed for the benefit of present and future generations. Establishes a water code in 1987 and begins this process. And under the water code, the Water Commission is this entity with 7 members that helps to manage water all across our Pai'aina. Now, after a number of years, in the early 2000s, they realized, actually, there's only former plantation interests on the Water Commission. And maybe it would be beneficial for us to have someone with significant experience in traditional and customary Native Hawaiian rights and riparian usage. Because maybe if we had that mana'o while we were making the decision, we wouldn't spend decades in protracted litigation. So this specific seat is added to the Water Commission so that someone with this experience is able to provide this to the Water Commission. And it does help with decision making. And Neil Hannes, who served 2 terms, is a wonderful example of how you can how this knowledge can help to inspire better decision making with an eye towards the future. And so unfortunately, Commissioner Hannes termed out in June of 2024. And so the process to replace him started in actually January of that year. A list of the 4 names that Kekai mentioned was forwarded to the governor in February of 2024. And despite op-eds in the paper, personal calls, pleas, the governor decided not to appoint anyone during the legislative session when they would have had to have been confirmed, and instead waited till after the session was pau and the legislature wasn't there anymore, and then said, and my understanding is that he actually asked Kimo Falconer to withdraw his name. So the person who was the last Luna of Pioneer Mill, and who has applied for this seat for someone with significant cultural expertise and garners a lot of opposition and concern from the community, withdraws his name. But then when he withdraws his name, the governor puts him on, and then the governor says, we don't have enough people now. I need to restart the whole process, even though there really isn't a way to do that. And personally, I think it was illegal for him to do that. He should have just picked from the remaining names on the list. And I will say that of the people on that list, the short list, in my old age, I have been monitoring water issues before the commission for about 25 years now. I have never seen that many people with such significant expertise, true lo'ea, on a short list. Auntie Hannah Springer from Kaupulehu, North Kona. Auntie Lori Buchanan from Molokai. We have never had anyone on the Water Commission from Molokai ever. Makahiapo Cashman, who runs the lo'i here at Kanevai and in Punalu'u, who teaches Papalo'i 1 and 2 for like over a decade. So true lo'ea. And instead of picking one of those people, he instead restarts the process, which we have significant questions. But to me, that just goes to the kind of bare knuckle politics that we're seeing from this governor and why it's really important for all of us to maka'ala. And I would just also note too that it's such a shame because in this time it's been, so how many months that the Water Commission hasn't had the benefit of having a lo'ea sitting in that seat for all of the many important issues that are coming before it every single meeting. And now he did appoint on an interim basis Hinana Rodriguez, who I understand has drawn significant criticism from the community. And so that interim appointment will have to be confirmed during this next legislative session.
A lot of the innards of politics of water and resource management. And from my experience there, it's super confusing. I don't know why leadership would do this. It's not that having just one seat that knows Hawaiian things is going to flip the whole commission. It doesn't actually work like that. And the commission itself is, under damage of losing its integrity and making better decisions around the public trust, without fulfilling that seat by someone that really knows their stuff. So the whole thing's very confusing to me. And like I said, part of that is what happened after the fires and recovering from that. So a couple bumper stickers I think we have so far. I heard Lāhaina is fire resilience. So please, spread that out, put it on your cars, whatever is, the longer term thinking, the ecological restoration, the work that happens in Ha'ena, the things that Kekai guys were doing for restoring streams, for literally generations, are things that will actually make Hawaii more safe, more resilient. So we shouldn't be fighting over these, minutia issues. We should be talking about restoring our aina and our landscapes. Like, we should be galvanizing the government, private sector, all of us together to make Hawaii more fire resilient, not focused on these short-term strategies. And the second one was, Kekai said, public protect the public. So, we bring our kupuna with us. Raitea was on this stage earlier. She mentioned Uncle George Helm. When I talked about this event, my Uncle Keola said, hey, mahalo Kekai, because if not for his family fighting, we would have never had Leali'i for Hawaiian homes a generation prior. And so we all find ourselves bringing people with us and then moving forward. Kekai, I think the community, I almost guarantee if we could do one survey right now, who should lead the vision and the future for Lāhaina, the Lāhaina community. I'd see that poll. I think it would be a real strong poll. Said, yep, listen to the community. In Ha'ena that happened. Uncle Chipper guys talked. They had a breakthrough. A year later, what does it look like if they were to listen to the community, Kekai? Like, what can we do collectively to help you folks get a better state for your aina in place?
The same thing I heard from the folks from Ha'ena. We're talking about regenerative everything, even regenerative tourism. And my nephew Paele always talked about that. There is on demand, and there is a need or want for regenerative tourism. Well, people come here, they're going to spend the vacation, but they come and helping us replant our forests. But these are the people that tend to come back again and again because they want to see the fruits of their labor and what they did. And when you teach them about our culture, you teach them what these trees do. Well, we always talk about kamalu uro'olele, but I always focus on the malu, which is the shade, but which means to protect. So that moisture that comes down to the ground, if we have that canopy, the malu, it protects that moisture on the ground from being evaporated, and we absorb that water into the ground, making the forest flourish even more and rebuilding our aquifers. That's the malu. And so by doing this, and we ain't never gonna get rid of tourism. Tourism gonna be there forever. We understand that. But we get ways where we can design tourism in a way that is more community friendly, I guess. Because where we're from, same like what we hear about the people from Ha'ena, our boat ramp in Mala was a boat ramp that was made for the local people because we got pushed out of Lāhaina town. We had no ramp to go to, so they built Mala off, so it would be non-commercial. 22 stalls. Later down the road, the state gives out 32 permits to operate out of Malawaf with only 22 stalls. You can see what's happening right now. I should take my boy early in the morning before you go to school because that's when the commercial boats go out. I mean, the fishermen go out, and that's when those commercial boats go out. And we watch fights on the pier. And my boys in like first and second grade, and we was watching guys just throwing blows on the pier because they're fighting for a spot, for get out. And that's the truth of it all. I didn't even understand the math. 22 stalls, 32 permits to operate out of there, not even taking into consideration the amount of people, the local people that just go out for fish. And guess what? Now we're on battle, and we're realizing that Don Chang, along with the state, is more in favor of helping out the commercial operators, along with the tourist industry. We opened up only about 2 months or so, maybe. I could be wrong, around there, right after the fire for for tourism. How does that make you feel as a local person who's struggling, who no more one house, who maybe lost one loved one? Yeah? Let alone thinking about even trying to figure out or navigate the insurance process to get back to your home when you find out this insurance assholes is the worst people you're ever going to deal with. Because they're not going to give you what you need for rebuild the house that you had. Which means it's going to put you back into a 30-year loan. A lot of people on fixed incomes who retired, who paid off their homes. How are they going to do that? And then, we get Hawaiian, I'm going to bring Hawaiian homes up real fast. We get Hawaiian homes, okay? First, they take forever for a build, but now they're going to build. And they're going to say it's $600,000 to $800,000 for a turnkey house. 6% interest. When I start doing the math, man, I'm going to pay $1.6 million after 30 years for that house. How is that affordable, and how does that benefit Hawaiians? So all these dynamics that's playing around in Lāhaina that we got to navigate, and all these fronts. So we got a lot of different groups in Lāhaina. For the most part, we work together, but we're all fighting different fronts all over the place. And it's hard, but we together, but we need to fight separate to take care of these fronts that we focused on. For me, I'm here with the whole water issue and stuff like that. We got other people who focus on legislative stuff. We got other people who focused on moku'ula and the restoration of that, and reforestation, just crazy. But every step of the way, what should be something that is real easy and common sense, you find the government in the way. Always. Hey, you know what? This is how we used to think about government. When we first went to the commission, we had Kamana and Neil. This is what we thought. We wasn't positive. It was like, when we look at Kamana, it was like, I wonder how this bugger. Then we look at Neil. Well, we think he get chance or what? That's how we came into the whole thing. It wasn't like right on, we get him. We was questioning. And so I remember what Neil was talking about this, and what Kamana said, it's like the integrity of the commission had to be built up over this number of decades to where we can kind of feel a little bit more comfortable that they're gonna make not one right decision, but like the right decision, right? And then now with the way the governor moving, the way what Don Chang doing, all of a sudden we're questioning them again. Wonder how this bugger, right? Not supposed to be like that, but that's kind of where it's going right now.
I'll take that as a sign. Clearly, I'm talking too much. Nah. But that's why I think in so many ways, in comparing the experiences of Lāhaina and the floods and the fire, and looking at both of that and the hulihia, it's really at bottom of failure of leadership, and not of the community, but of the government. And it's really been the public that's been protecting the public, quoting Kekai Keahi. But, right, and so, that's having worked in both communities and trying to be supportive of both communities in the response to disasters, that's the fundamental difference that I see. The way the government has, in Lāhaina, refused to center community in decision-making, and has treated Kanaka and Aloha as the problem instead of the solution.
Yeah, I just want to say too that like what you guys are getting into the nitty gritty. I think it's really important and just this moment, and I mean for Lāhaina too, but that just to understand all these structural issues that are exacerbated by these events or these crises, whatever you want to call them, it's just these things are underlying day to day, right? And so it just makes us so brittle in the sense of like, why are we so vulnerable when these things happen? And I mean, fire is so easy in one sense to think about because you look at the grass. I mean, this slope above us is burnt 4 or 5 times since I've worked here, right? So just as an example, it's like easy to understand how these things happen. You can look to all this expertise, again, in this ecological lens to say, oh, we have the knowledge to change the landscape. We have now like the knowledge on the social side of like, what does the political process look like? But you can't drop the ball. And my big worry, and listening, especially this morning, is, to what extent we are leaning on these leaders that are emerging and are like standing so strong in our communities and like the weight that's on their shoulders. And I like worry, do we have that everywhere, right? Is it enough to like use these? I mean, we want to shine light on these examples, but then do we have them everywhere? And we're like leaning so heavily on you guys. And so something else to think about is like, where do the kind of, systems, like how do we lean on them, or can we lean on them on changing them from the inside so that they can prop us up as well? If the public's going to save the public, like, I mean, the public doesn't run the fire department, right? Like there are like a huge need for, I guess in that sense, just like there are going to be instances where we need to lean on the state. And so that question that was posed to you guys was super critical. Like, where do we fill in, and how much are we like picking up the pieces where these gaps exist, these kipuka?
Yeah, and like Kekai said, as a Kanaka, stepping in to be on a state board, it's not a good idea in some ways, right? I mean, like, it's not like I'm gonna wake up in the morning and like this is gonna be a real celebration here. It's gonna be a lot of fun. Again, I understand our political history. I understand the vast socioeconomic injustice, the occupation, and I understand that these systems really haven't worked for us on the whole. So when you step into that role, and then you see our communities fighting for generations, like even that's not easy work. How do you get the commission to start to do what's right, what its mandate is to protect the public trust? Really simple. And then you build trust in communities, and then you see that erode. It's very dangerous, especially tied with, I'll be honest, like the kind of Democrats and Republicans don't have necessarily, at least what I saw with Kaleo, that was total Trump tactics. That was total, I'm going to blame this Hawaiian on this issue and spread it all around like wildfire. And then as these guys are fighting for their community and understand who survived, like that was really, really dangerous. Unprecedented, I think, for Hawaii in many ways, and something that we have to be super maka'ala about in these times of crisis. When the next one comes, how do we know what the truth is? Who do we look to understand the truth? And I think for me, I'm going to trust the community leaders that have been fighting for a long time for their place. I'm going to trust that integrity, and it works in Kauai. After Hurricane Iniki, no matter if you're Hawaiian, people fall in line. It works in Lāhaina. Before FEMA got there, I was like, holy smokes, everybody feeding each other. So what's it going to take for our government to listen to our people? So maybe I'll pause there and some calls to action, and then we'll take some questions, I think, from the community here. But any specific calls to action that we think we want to have here today to share out, both we'll see what happens on Kanai'okana when this comes out online. We might get all kind of junk emails, but love you guys, everybody out there.
I think for sure when the whole the cultural seat for the Water Commission come up in January or February, well, that's when we're going to need voices and letters and multitudes of people to sound out. Yeah, because we know already, and I hope the governor watching, the governor no listen to you guys. Yeah, and so we're gonna need these other people for see what the governor don't like them see. So we gotta voice out loud. And before I move on, can't you say one thing? Keani, I see her over there. Yeah, I've been kind of trashing county and state government like that, but she's our rep, yeah? I was on a plane flying back from New Mexico, trying to get back to Maui when the fire went happened. Couldn't find my father. Oh boy, call her up to help me get back into Lāhaina because they wasn't letting me back into Lāhaina. Next you know, she's sending generators and all kinds of stuff for me to take in so I can help the people out when we never have government in there yet. I was trying to get in, I couldn't get in. She said, wait, I come in, and then we go, and I said, shoot. What used to happen when I pull up by the police officer, I used to coaching football a long time ago, so he wouldn't let me through. But I had 6 trucks of stuffs that we took in, and a lot of stuff that came from Canada, we give to the old folks, so we never have power. We never have water, and I took them to our old folks and gave them to them that came from her. So I gotta hold you up there. Thank you. Keahi for governor.
That's one call to action. Keahi
One
for
call to action,
governor.
Keahi for governor.
So one thing on the Lo'ea seat, I think Kekai is absolutely right, as usual. I think the Lo'ea seat is really important, and for me, that's less about this particular nominee. I don't know Hinano Rodriguez. So there's lots of opinions about what happened when he was at State Historic Preservation Division. But for me, this is more about the process and about the public trust and about integrity and about the governor kind of refusing to play by the rules. And for me, that's more of what this is about than about this particular nominee. But he will have to be confirmed by the Senate. And when that comes before what I believe will be Lorraine Inouye's committee, I'm sure Kekai will send out an action alert and we can let people know who are interested in weighing in. But I also think that at the legislature, we're going to have to maka'ala again this year because last year we saw a lot going down. I mean, in this time when really everything should have been focused on Lāhaina, there were hundreds of bills, almost none passed. And yes, I'm grateful for the short-term vacation rental. That was important. But there were tremendous opportunities with respect to reform on water and the public trust, with respect to issues around fire. And a lot of the stuff that we saw was BS. I mean, Clay was down there trying to educate people about that aloha aina is true resilience, fire resilience in Hawaii, right? And so I think we're all going to have to pay attention this legislative session starting in January, not just with respect to the Lo'ea seat, but with respect to everything else that's going down.
I could just add, I mean, because I'm usually sort of talking with students in my program, and a lot of them are like focused, there's some social science happening and biophysical science, and this idea of, my background's from plants, like I'd rather be like up on top of the mountain somewhere. But thinking about how, grabbing these kinds of issues and understanding the process that these guys are spelling out for, even if your interest is, maybe up Mauka and you're not thinking about that kind of interface with society, but there are these tangible policies that are being debated that are like, where there's laws being thrown around, and just trying to understand that this is all connected, and especially this idea of a public trust, this whole idea of like a commons, how do you manage these things, or how do you take care of these things, and where are our limitations, especially coming from like, this conservation world where we're always underfunded and understaffed and all these things, but these provide really tangible movements, honestly, to where you can plug in and like really understand, okay, this water issue as like a core example is relevant to everything else you'd like to see happen on the land. So
You're on call to action. I see plenty of students inside there. It's for you guys. In Lāhaina, we're training our young for fight on battle that is even harder than what you face. You got to be ready here. You got to be educated. You got to be able to communicate, for make the difference. Yeah? I was a graduate of this school. I graduated in 99, and I see one of my teachers, John Osorio. I don't know if you remember me, but I was there. Aunanike Kanalu Young. They put it to me, this idea It was kind of hibernating for a little while. You know, I was still young. I got home. I was doing my thing. And then the thing started to awaken again. And when it put me in this position, not because I wanted to. Sometimes kuleana, when a thing come to you, you know choose kuleana sometimes. That thing come to you in front of your lap is what you do with them. And for all you young guys, listen close. One day, this might wake up in you, and you're going to find yourself at the forefront, fighting one battle, not just for yourself, for your kids, for your kupunas, and everybody else around you. Yeah? Like I said, I never thought I was going to be up here. Before, if I stand in front of like 5 people, I sound like Porky Pig. Now I say kind of talk not bad a little bit, yeah.
Mahalo nui, mahalo nui. So I want to have some time for our community to ask questions. So again, same, I think we have about 10, 12 minutes left, 10 minutes. So if we can keep the questions not too long so more people can jump in, but anyone want to step to the mic? Anyone have a burning question?
So you started to already answer the question that I had written down earlier, because it was written based off of a response of remarks that were made in the beginning of the panel. But I wanted to provide an opportunity for you to expound a little more if you so wish. Dr. Beamer said, what is it going to take to make the government listen? And then Kekai said, Keani for governor. But what I heard is we have to be the government. What is the message to our rising next generation of leaders if we concede government to those seeking to exploit and profit at the expense of our community? My concern is that by villainizing government as a system instead of those holding positions in government doing the bidding of the extractive industries, our OPO will be deterred from joining what is being referred to as the enemy. I'm thinking of 22-year-old Hana Rowiti in Aotearoa who went from her marae to rock parliament. The government is supposed to look like our community. It's not supposed to be like that, like Kekai said. Kapua said it's the government leadership, and Clay said systems need to constantly be adjusted and readjusted because they're gonna keep coming back and circumventing the system as we adjust it, just like the Lo'ea position. And in quoting our keynote speaker today, Dr. Lila June-Johnson, who says the most important victory is not found in the outcome of the battle. It is found in the process of the battle. How you fight is where you gain your honor and your victory. And you Hamas inspire all of us, inspire me so much. It's been said by us, and I heard it in a conversation or an interview in Aotearoa, that we fight now so that our mo'opuna don't have to. But I challenge that messaging because the fight never ends. And that if we're misleading our mo'opuna into thinking, we're gonna win this fight now and then you won't have to fight, then we're failing them, because the powers that want to exploit will never stop fighting. And so for our community, we can never stop fighting either. Sorry, the question was?
Mahalo Keani. Polole, mahalo.
Get up here.
The question was, what is the message to the rising next generation leaders if we concede government to those to exploit, who seek to exploit and profit at the expense of our community?
I know, I've been saying this, and I say this all the time to my nephew folks, and the next, are always pushing our next generation up to the top and saying, this is the guys. And you know what, when you get to a certain level of leadership or power, sometimes some people, let them go, yeah? Or some people are afraid to let them go because they're not sure what the next generation going to offer. The next generation, Lāhaina, I ain't even afraid for let go nothing. I confident in these guys. And the thing is, sometimes, we gotta know when to step back because we hold them back. But then at the same time, we gotta be able to encourage, right? to get them moving and make them believe. Sometimes, when they're young, be quiet, sit down there, you don't know what you're talking about. Yeah? I listen. Sometimes some stuff, they don't know what they're talking about, but some stuff, hey, good idea. Yeah? And so, hey, could you tell me some more about this? And then you prop them up. My nephew Piʻo boy was with me when he was a small kid. He's with Lāhaina strong. He was with me from he was a small kid, and he been with me the whole time. And I watched him develop, and I said, bro, and I told his mother, I told, watch, one day, bro, this guy gonna take on leadership position. And he only young. I think he just made 30, I think so. And I can see him moving front, and get plenty young like that in Lāhaina that's making that move. So I told them, I'm gonna have to find on time when it's the right time. When I see that you guys is ready, I'm gonna take my step back, but now I'm gonna be on a role of support. And then let them take us, because my father went step back, and he allowed me to come to the front. If he was at the front the whole time, I would not be able to grow. And sometimes you gotta go through the hard stuff, right, for grow. And then we move up, and then from there, we gotta let the next generation go too. Cannot shy away from hard work. Cannot shy away from being scared. Be scared. Go through the hard work. When you look back, you can be like, that was nothing. Because where I stand now and what I'm doing for our community, it was worth it all. Yeah? And I get my wahine over here with me. She the one that got to put up with all the nonsense that I bring home every time. My anger sometimes, my frustration. I don't like talk. You know what I mean? So, the support for the next generation.
Yeah, I think it may have come across the critiques on government as a whole, and I think part of that is just so we're not name-calling specific people all the time, Keahi. But it's definitely not you. And we support, like I said, Kekai's right, looking at me when I was on the Water Commission. How this guy, like our community needs to be that way because the government hasn't mostly worked for us. But courageous actors like you and Mahina and Drew, and I can name a whole group of other Hawaiians that understand our history, that are in these really, really difficult positions, that are trying to make systems that haven't historically worked for us do something different. And we got to keep fighting that and supporting you, and others that do that. So please know that's where I'm coming from. So the future, next generation has to understand our political consciousness and find a way to build off of Lāhaina. Kili Kotubete guys, those guys restoring, Paipaio Heia, Kanekoa, Kako'iwi, seeing Heia is a different place, so it will never look like it did when I was a kid driving through there. And that next generation going to see and feel and breathe and live in that landscape. And that's huge. Like the power that they're seeing, that's like Hokulea was for us, So I have tremendous hope, and I think Keahi for governor. I think you're right. I think we need an Aloha Aina governor for Hawaii. That's true. Yeah.
I think it's like really an important question, especially in the context of this, because I saw, tracking social media, people are like, we're losing faith in the aftermath of this. And then I always joke with my friends, I think I'd be an anarchist probably if it wasn't for fire, because I get through fire, I've gotten to work with fire departments, firefighters in particular. And so you see, I had this opportunity to sort of have faith, right, in these, it's like bureaucracy that I think there's a lot of reasons, and especially given the history of Hawaii, a lot of reasons to have mistrust. But the other thing that I try to think about is, and again, knowing a little bit of just the hands-on work it takes to do Aloha Aina, right, like to restore, do forest restoration, this kind of stuff. The scale at which this needs to happen is massive, right? And again, if we put all the burden onto community groups, like despite all of their capacity and like the amazing knowledge that's coming out of that, I fear that it won't be enough. And so I do think we need to, look towards leadership and cultivate that leadership within our government in that sense, because this has to be mobilized at like large scale, right? And my fear, Lāhaina's in good hands. Like I don't think, or worry. I mean, I worry. But like the thing that I worry most about is the fact that here we are a year past, and every community, including Lāhaina, from a fire risk perspective, is in the same exact boat it was before Lāhaina. There's been very little change on the ground. And the reason is it takes work, it takes money, it's like hard. It's gonna be hard to do this. We can do it. Like there's no doubt that like these guys are developing solutions. Like that is, that's the easy part. But so I do think there's a huge role to play in that space. And how else are we really going to do it?
And my message, Kenny, to the rising next generation is really quick. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And if we're going to scale Aloha Aina, and if we're really looking to that as the future, right, then we need to be everywhere. We need the Billies in Ha'ena, like planning their communities, the Billies and the Lays, but we also need attorneys. I mean, it's not just planners. Like if you want to be a practitioner, you need everything. We need doctors, we need attorneys, we need engineers, we need people who can speak those languages to translate all this indigenous knowledge that we have that really is the way forward. So, mahalo.
Mahalo. I see Uncle Neil on this side.
Mahalo, and Kamana, thank you for providing this showcase for the brilliance of our community. You know, what we saw today from Kauai as well as what we see here. It's not isolated to just those communities. It's everywhere. Calls to action. Kapua, I wonder if you might speak to the bills that really relate to a more independent water commission in terms of where it sits in government, as well as its ability to have independent counsel. Regardless of who your governor is, it could be good guys, bad guys, and so forth. They stand for election every 4 years, and they're responsive to that electorate in order to stay in office. And so when you have an asset, a public trust asset that's meant for multiple generations, sometimes it puts pressure upon them to overuse that asset and compromise the future in order to get reelected. So that's one question about that, the bills that are in maybe considered this session with respect to that. The second maybe is an opportunity for you to, Kamana, to tee up some thoughts about Aina Aloha economic futures. How do we make it so the ownership of land is irrelevant? Because this 1%, billionaire acquisition is unrelenting. It's not going to slow down. So somehow we have to have some policies in place that make it irrelevant who the landowner is, and that relates to an action plan that we need, a call to action with respect to the real estate development industry of Hawaii. The problem with this governor is he is really dependent upon this group, this political group. They have his ear, and they are like 50 years behind us in terms of thinking, in terms of land and power mentality, that anything for the environment, anything for the culture is anti-economy, is anti-development. We want housing. We want opportunity for jobs. We want innovation and so forth. And one of the best articulations of that is the Aina Aloha Economic Futures work, and you might share that with the group. Kamana. Mahalo.
I'll be really quick. I think what Neil is talking about is there were several measures that were introduced to the legislature last year, Senate Bill 3327 and House Bill 2690, that really looked to reform the Water Commission by operationalizing amendments from the Water Commission itself, from the Review Commission over 30 years ago, and amendments that were made to try to take the politics out of our water resource management and make it more about the resource and less about the power and the politics. Both of those efforts failed despite tremendous and outpouring of support from Lāhaina and many other places. And it's ironic because actually there were measures that would have made it easier for the Water Commission to govern post-fire in this designated water management area. Because of the way the biennium is set up, those are similar bills would have to be reintroduced this year. So we're just gonna have to wait and see until the legislature opens on the third Wednesday of January. But I think that those measures are important because I think in the similar vein to what Keani mentioned earlier, I actually love our water code and the adaptive framework and the constitutional public trust that we have here in Hawaii because that's grounded in Lāhaina. So I think there's tremendous potential. The problem is the politicking that's gone on around it. And so I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think there are some minor tweaks that we can do that can make it truly governance, by the people and for the people, as opposed to just for the plantations.
Yeah, and in terms of Aina Loka economic futures, we did tremendous work in trying to fundamentally reshape our economy. The things that we're talking about, circularity, regenerative tourism, basically Aloha Aina in place, is still ongoing. We have a matrix that many counties, at least for like small county planning efforts, funding efforts, they utilize. So if you go to Aina Aloha Economic Futures or Aina Aloha Futures, you can see kind of that rubric and decision-making tool. We formed it, it was during COVID time when everything was shut down and we saw the incredible resilience of our natural systems. We saw the Lalakea returning to Waikiki, Honu just showing up on the beach, all in places that we're not used to because never have 9 million tourists. And so we use that opportunity to really say, like, hey, how do we fundamentally restructure our economy coming out of COVID? And so I think we've made some successes. We got more funding to Hawaiian homes, for instance. Like I said, HSTA has adopted a regenerative tourism model where it's not just about growth. But these are big systems and structures to shift. So it's not, not as immediate as I would like it to be. It's not that hulihia that I want to see necessarily. And we started the Po'aike Lāhaina as this Center for Ancestral Circular Economy, where we're working with UDI folks on the Climate Commission to incorporate circular economy strategies into the state's plan, uplifting Kanekoa folks and Kili'i. Aloha Aina practice all around, again, Aloha Aina is fire resilience. Aloha Aina is an economic alternative that regenerates for our Aina and for people. Aloha Aina is social economic redistributions of wealth so that people can afford to live here and thrive. I mean, those are all the things that we're trying to push towards, and we need collective effort and action. There's so much of it in pockets across in different communities, and we need collectively to understand that this is an alternative, economic system and structure. And last year's Piʻo Summit was on this, so I don't want to get into all kind of details, but if you saw that, you saw some of my international friends, doing work in this area. And so all around the globe, we're understanding that, like, hey, the economy is tied into, economic destruction, climate crisis, and we have to grapple with GDP and change our economy to be regenerative, like lo'i, like local i'a. And so that's some of the efforts that we're involved in and is ongoing.
Just so you guys know, in Lāhaina, we're not stuck. We're not changing. We're not looking in and being innovative, yeah? We've been having meetings with other different groups and different people, and we're looking at how we can move forward after the fire that puts our community first and not be second-class citizens to tourism. So we understand that is important to have the economic engine, but the economic engine shouldn't dictate how you live your life. And so what we're trying to do is reinvent ourselves in a way that puts us first. And there's nothing wrong with that. Some people cringe when you say put yourself first as being selfish. It's not. So we're looking at the reuse of reclaimed water, not for drinking, but for irrigation. So we're not taking water out of our aquifers and our streams. We're using just reclaimed water for our parks to change our fire system. Remember the first flaw? With a fire hydrant, put it on R1 water. So it's not tied into our drinking water. And that's going to be our fire suppression. That's going to be what we're going to farm with. That's the things that we're going to irrigate our schools. That reclaimed water, we're producing about 5 to 6 million gallons a day. We're looking at also taking the R1, pumping them up up to a higher elevation, flowing it downhill, using the old ditch system that used to be a negative thing that took water away from our valleys. Now using that ditch system to take this R1 back into town so that it can be used for the public use. And while it's running back into town, put them into reservoirs that step down and put hydro generators on top. We're looking at those things. We're looking at doing microgrids where, development, you get 100 homes. One of the properties is designated for a battery system that can power 100 homes. So we're a little bit more energy efficient. We're looking at so much different things. We're not really paying attention to desalinization though. And I'm going to say this, if we're going to desalinization, then we outlive the ability of this land to sustain our life. We cannot do that. I don't go to the store with $5 and expect to buy $100 worth of groceries. But the way we look at water and the way how we use water, and now we're going to desalinization because we cannot maintain and keep up with the growth that we're having, we're making another problem because desalinization is the byproduct is a pollutant. And so those kind of things that we're looking at as reshaping and putting our people first. So we're not stuck. Get plenty good ideas that's coming out of Lāhaina because of this.
Mahalo nui. So how about join me in just big mahalo to our panel, Kekai, Clay, and Kapua.